So NL Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Pitt Panthers. And this is a team that was 8-5 in the 2019 season, ended up having a pretty great season overall in comparison to how Pitt has been in the past. Of course, they made it off to a bowl game, also had an 8-win season. So once again, great season for Pitt. But how will they do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full prediction and preview on every game on the Panthers schedule going into the 2020 season. So with that being said, let's look at your season trends from 2019. Once again, they were 8-5 overall. They were 5-3 between September and October, and then 3-2 between November and the postseason. So, once again, this team honestly in general did have a couple of pretty good wins down the stretch. They had several really close games though throughout the season. If you look at their key wins there, all 4 of those games were very close ones, but in the end, they definitely did get it done. They beat off Duke on the road 33-30. Also had a win against Syracuse 27-20, and those were both road games to keep in mind. And they also beat off North Carolina 34-27. That was a home game on November 14th. And they also beat off Eastern Michigan in their bowl game 34-30. So in the end, this team definitely had some good wins down the stretch. They were all very close, but in the end, still a great season, I would say, for Pittsburgh in the end. But as far as their returning production looks, of course, they returned their starting quarterback in Kenny Pickett. And last season, he was a good quarterback. He had some issues, of course. He had an interception issue for the most part, but that was his biggest problem, I would say, last season. He did have 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, and so yeah, I'd say his touchdown to interception ratio was a bit weird last season. He's definitely got to fix that going into next season if this Pitt team is going to be able to win their division, which, Pittsburgh next season, I think is going to be a big contender to win their division in the ACC. But in the end, yeah, that's going to be a big reason as to how Pittsburgh would end up winning their division is if Kenny Pickett's able to improve himself, which I definitely think he can. He's got a lot of upside. He put up 3,100 yards last season, also had nearly a 62% completion rate. So, in the end, 62% really is not all that bad at all. So, yeah, I definitely think Kenny Pickett next season is a quarterback to watch out for. And, yeah, me personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing how he does because, it's so hard to predict how Kenny Pickett's going to do next season just because of how much uncertainty there is there. But his offense is looking very good. They do return their top running back in A.J. Davis, which is going to be a big return for this team in general. He had 800 yards last season with 4 touchdowns. And so, yeah, watch out for him going into next season for sure. They also returned their second running back in Vincent Davis. And last season, he had 340 yards with 5 touchdowns. And so, yeah, in the end, he was a great running back last season too. So this running back core, I really do not have any concerns about. They're looking very good going into the 2020 season. And yeah, you can't forget about the running back / receiver and Malik Carter. And last season, he split up his yardage in between rushing and receiving. Of course, last season he had 240 yards of rushing, and he also had 180 yards of receiving. So he had 430 total yards last season for the most part, along with a couple of touchdowns. And so, yeah, once again, running back core is looking great for the Panthers going into next season. As far as the receiving core goes, of course, you lose your top receiver in Maurice French, and of course, last season he put up 870 yards with 4 touchdowns, and so that's going to be a tough loss there for Pittsburgh. And of course, if you look at the receiving core in general, there's really not much concern there as well because you do return your second receiver in Taysier Mack, and you also return your third receiver in Chalky Jaquez Lewis. And so in the end, the receiving core is looking very good outside of losing their top one and Maurice French. And of course, as far as the offensive line goes, you do lose 1 on there. And you also lose 1 defensive lineman, 1 linebacker, and 2 in the secondary. So you do lose 4 on the defense, but in the end, 4 on the defense really is right around average. Most teams in general, I would say lose to 3 to 4 on defense. And so for Pittsburgh, really that's not much out of the ordinary. But it brings up the question, too, chances of Pittsburgh winning their division in 2020. I definitely think in that ACC division where, you got several teams like Virginia Tech. You got Virginia, of course. They won it last season. And you got Pittsburgh as well. Several really good teams are in that division, I think. And there are several teams as well. Pretty much every team in that division I could see winning that ACC division next season. But in the end, I would say Pittsburgh for sure is right up there to win it. I think Pittsburgh for sure has got the talent on their team to do it. It's just a matter of whether or not they can contend and whether or not they're able to go upon that. And of course, with Kenny Pickett at quarterback, there's just so much uncertainty there too. Who knows whether or not he's going to be good. He did put up 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, so his touchdown to interception ratio really does concern me. But As far as the yardage goes, once again, though, he did put up 3,100 yards. So really, he's got, I think, the potential to be a great quarterback next season. It's just a matter of whether or not he can actually do that, which, yeah, there's just a lot of uncertainty there. But yeah, as far as the offense looks, I think the offense looks great. The defense does have a couple of uncertainties there, losing 4. But in the end, I think for Pittsburgh, they're going to be able to contend regardless of that. But as far as your schedule looks, of course, you start off the season against Miami, Ohio on September 5th. Then you got a road trip to Marshall on the 10th, or on the 12th, actually. You've got Duke then on the 26th. Then a road trip to Miami on the 3rd. And yeah, speaking of which, they will not be playing Richmond on the 19th. I believe Richmond will not be playing football this fall. And so you will not be having that game on the 19th, which honestly for Pittsburgh, I think their chances of winning that game against Richmond would be pretty high. And so that's going to be a tough loss there for them not to be able to play that game against Richmond, because if they keep the bowl eligibility still at a 6-win threshold, I mean, that could be very tough for Pittsburgh there if they don't have a game against Richmond. But once again, there's still a lot of uncertainty in the college football world as well as to how that bowl eligibility is going to work. But in the end, you do play Miami once again on the 3rd. You've got a bye week in between that game and then Notre Dame on the 17th. And that's going to be a very tough game there against Notre Dame on October 17th. Then you got Georgia Tech on the 24th, followed by a road trip to Florida State on the 31st. As far as your November schedule goes, of course, you got Virginia Tech on the 6th. You've got another big contender in that division with North Carolina on the 14th. Very important game there. And then you also have on the 21st, you've got Virginia on the road. Then you have Syracuse to finish off your season on November 28th. So in the end, here's what I'm expecting out of your September. I think you go through your September undefeated. I think you beat off Miami, Ohio, Marshall, and Duke pretty easily. I mean, all 3 of those games in general are pretty easy. And so I think in general, you should definitely start off 3-0 next season. You'll also be 1-0 in the conference going into your October. But I think in the October it gets a little bit bumpy for this Panthers team. I think you do take a loss against Miami on October 3rd, and I also think you take a loss against Notre Dame on the 17th. And I think both of those games in general are going to be really tough. I mean, Miami next season, I don't expect them to be a national contender by any means, but I definitely think Miami will be a very improved team. And so I think in general that's going to be a very tough game in general. Plus, you have to play them on the road, and so I think that Miami game is going to be a loss. And I also think you lose to Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame next season is still very uncertain as to whether they're even going to be playing football in 2020, considering almost all of their games have been canceled already. But yeah, Notre Dame, that's going to be a tough one there. I think Notre Dame would get the win in the end on October 17th. I also think you get a win, though, after those 2 losses against Georgia Tech. That's going to be a big win there. However, that's going to be before losing another game to Florida State on the road on the 31st. And I went back and forth on that one. I think Florida State is a good team next season. I think they're going to be right around Pittsburgh's level as far as team skill goes. And so I think that one's going to be a close one for sure. But I think Florida State steals a win off of Pittsburgh in the end. So after a bumpy October, you will be 4-3 going into your November with a 2-3 conference record. And here's what I'm expecting out of your last 4 games. I do think you go 2-2. I think you take a loss to Virginia Tech on November 6th. Because, I mean, that Virginia Tech team's looking very good going into next season. I think they're only a 1-2 loss team next year. But yeah, that North Carolina game, I also think North Carolina is going to be a very good team next season. And so I think North Carolina is going to be a very tough one. However, Pittsburgh is going to get a win off of North Carolina on November 14th. That's probably going to be your signature win of the season. I mean, having a big road game there and beating North Carolina on the road, that's going to be a very tough task. But I think the Panthers do get it done in the end. And I think you do beat off North Carolina. I also think you take a loss, though, the next week to Virginia. And I went back and forth on that one, too. I mean, you could argue that they're going to have a lot of momentum going into that game against Virginia. But I think Virginia next season, I mean, I don't expect them to be as good as they were in 2019. But I do expect them to be a good enough team to get a win there against Pittsburgh. And so I think Virginia does get the win there in the end on November 21st. However, I think you do finish off your regular season with a win against Syracuse on the 28th. And I think that one's going to be a close one as well. Syracuse next season will be a decent team. I don't think they're going to be a bowl team by any means, but I do think Syracuse will be good enough to give Pittsburgh a fight there. And so you will beat off Syracuse, but in a close one in the end. So your record prediction for next season is 6-5. You're going to have a 4-5 conference record. And once again, looking back on that Richmond game, that's going to be a very tough loss there for Pittsburgh not to be able to play Richmond because, I mean, if we're all honest here, I think Pittsburgh would be a very heavy favorite to win that game against Richmond on September 19th. And so it's it's definitely to Pittsburgh's loss not to be able to play that game against that team, because this could easily be a 7-5 team next season if you were able to play that game. But yeah, in the end, your record prediction 6-5 for next season. I would say that's honestly not all that bad. I mean, you're making a bowl game pretty much no matter what, no matter whether they change the bowl threshold or not. So yeah, in the end, 6 wins, definitely not all that bad for Pittsburgh. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. If you disagree with anything here, be sure to let me know in the comments below. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But in the end, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. And if you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. Really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.